Despite being treated as nothing more than a servant by both my mother-in-law and my husband, I was determined to stay by his side. However, my husband changed. He became spoiled by his mother, who encouraged him to mock and deceive me. I've decided that this cannot be the end of my story, and I've sworn to seek revenge against both my husband and my mother-in-law. My name is Mia. I live with my husband, and we work together. I am overwhelmed with the daily grind of work and household chores, leaving no time for myself. My mother-in-law lives nearby, yet my husband offers no help with the household tasks. When I visit their home, I am treated as if I were merely a servant. Today, I'm at the hospital caring for my brother-in-law because my mother-in-law called me early, even on my day off, to do so. Previously, they would make me drive them around like a taxi driver, but now I'm responsible for taking care of my paraplegic brother-in-law. Although I feel sorry for him, I've promised to do this out of my own free will. Renah, my brother-in-law, was the favorite of my mother-in-law, and as a result, my husband was largely ignored. This irritated me, and I always tried to support my husband. However, the attitude of my mother-in-law and husband changed dramatically when Renah had his accident and was confined to a wheelchair. Honestly, she wanted him out of the house. To her, staying disabled and being unable to earn money was a shame for the family. Despite the help we received from Renah in the past, she continued to treat him as an unwelcome intruder, which was extremely cruel. My husband also began mocking Renah, mimicking my mother-in-law's behavior. It's disturbing to think of Renah, who not only lost the use of his legs due to the accident, but also had to endure such harsh words. Despite Renah being kind to my husband, he made comments that only worsened his brother's situation. During a hospital visit, my husband told Renah, "Look, Renah, when you get out of the hospital, find another place to live because you'll only be a burden to our mother. After all, you've become a useless cripple." Those words made me furious, and I ended up arguing with my husband. I explained to him that Renah had done so much for us in the past, and that his current situation was simply the result of an unfortunate accident. Therefore, we should not speak to him that way, especially since Renah had always treated my husband differently than my mother-in-law did. I also expressed how Sandra, my mother-in-law, had treated me all this time, verbally abusing me and forcing me to work as a driver on my days off. However, despite my pleas, my husband didn't understand. Due to Renah's accident, my mother-in-law's attitude towards him changed completely, and now she prioritized him. While I could understand my husband's feelings as her son to some extent, this sudden and extreme change in attitude was terrible. He never had a personality worthy of praise, but I never expected him to change so drastically. The sudden shift in my husband's behavior was both shocking and heartbreaking. One day, my husband suggested a family trip to Hawaii, thinking it would be good to have some fun and break away from the routine. We were all very excited about the idea, but I began to worry about Renah, who couldn't go to Hawaii because of his condition. I voiced my concerns, and it was decided that a caregiver would be hired to stay with Renah during the trip. However, I couldn't help but feel sorry for him and wondered if we could really enjoy the vacation. A few days later, while I was still trying to make sense of my husband's words, Renah called me. He had heard about the trip and told me not to worry about him, that he would be fine. He wanted me to relax and enjoy the vacation. Jokingly, I replied that traveling with those two would probably be more exhausting than usual, and Renah laughed. Encouraged by his words, I told everyone that it would be good for us to go on vacation, and I began making preparations for the trip to Hawaii. However, I was the one responsible for organizing the itinerary and contacting the travel agency, while my mother-in-law kept informing me of her preferred hotels and itinerary. Her preferences changed constantly, so I had to adjust the plans over and over again. Finally, 2 weeks before our departure, the plans for Hawaii were finalized. The 2 weeks leading up to the trip were very hectic, as I was helping with hospital visits and my brother-in-law's travel arrangements. Then, I was informed that I had to stay behind and take care of him. I was shocked and resentful. Hiring a caregiver costs money, but they expected me to do it for free. My husband and mother-in-law laughed as they headed to the airport without me, leaving me stuck in that place. After unpacking my things at home, I went to my mother-in-law's house, using the spare key to enter. I told Renaa what had just happened while he was lying in the living room. I'm sorry for suggesting the trip, but I never expected it to end like this. Renaa apologized and said that this outcome was for the best since it gave him a break from their presence. I didn't expect much from my mother-in-law, but this incident revealed her true nature even further. I didn't know how to express my feelings about my husband's true nature, but I reached a point where I no longer cared. As I looked down, I saw Renaa's legs and left hand motionless. But in the next moment, his body, which had been lying still, suddenly sat up. Startled, I shouted and asked how he managed to get up. My brother-in-law explained that although he had been in an accident, he was not permanently paralyzed. For a long time, he had wanted to free himself from my mother-in-law's overbearing interference. He stayed with the family because they convinced him to keep living with them instead of moving out on his own. I could barely make ends meet, he said, and living alone wasn't financially feasible. At the time of the accident, Renaa had been thinking about how to get rid of his mother without causing any trouble. The turning point came when he lied, claiming that he was paralyzed and couldn't walk. That's when my mother-in-law's attitude shifted. Suddenly, Sandra started favoring my husband. What a terrible attitude. She stopped caring about her own son just because he had supposedly become paralyzed. Renaa looked me in the eyes and made a proposal. Let's fight them together. What do you think? I want revenge. Do you want to join me, Mia? I had no intention of letting things end this way. This incident truly opened my eyes to who my husband and mother-in-law really were, so I accepted my brother-in-law's invitation. A week later, Sandra and my husband returned from Hawaii. As soon as they got home, my husband called me. Hey, where are my things? The apartment is empty. When I returned, I told him that I had sent his belongings to his mother's house so that he could now live with her, just as he had always wanted. I finished by telling him that I wanted a divorce. This is so selfish. You want a divorce? What's wrong with you all of a sudden? What do you want? He shouted, finally losing his temper. I began to argue irrationally with my husband, confronting him about how he had betrayed my trust and how much I had suffered for him. I also revealed that, during the preparations for the move, I discovered he had been secretly giving money to Sandra while keeping it hidden from me. Looking back, I realized that my mother-in-law's extravagant shopping sprees continued even after Renaa quit his job. I had always assumed that Renaa was financing these luxuries, but it turned out that he had significantly reduced his spending after leaving his job. This meant Sandra must have been receiving money from someone else, and the only possible person was my husband. I told him that I found out he was covering his mother's extravagances while we were struggling at home. He tried to contradict me with feeble, confusing excuses, but I knew everything he said was true, and he couldn't come up with a valid excuse. I told him that Renaa had already moved out and that I was living in a new place too. I made it clear that neither Renaa nor I had any intention of dealing with him and Sandra anymore, so it would be better for him to live at his mother's house. After all, your family is just your mother, right? I said this and was about to hang up the phone when I heard my husband's angry voice. You're such an insolent woman. I should have divorced you long ago. I'll be much happier living with my mother, he shouted into the phone. Even in this situation, he was still talking about his mother. After receiving my husband's divorce request, I sent the divorce papers, resolved the financial matters, and finally felt free. However, that was just the beginning. My ex-husband called me with a hoarse voice, saying that things would be much better now that he didn't have a nagging wife or a disabled brother around. I mentioned that my brother-in-law wasn't actually paralyzed and that he was enjoying life abroad. I also informed him that my mother-in-law was deeply in debt. I blocked my ex-husband's number and moved on as if we were strangers. A month later, I received a letter from my ex-husband filled with complaints, apologies, and a ridiculous proposal to get back together. I threw the letter in the trash. It seems that my ex-husband lost all his wealth trying to pay off Sandra's debts, but it wasn't enough. They had to sell the family home. As for my mother-in-law, she's now desperately searching for Renaa, who has gone abroad. Life after the divorce has been uneventful for me, and I recently discovered that my mother-in-law declared bankruptcy. I no longer feel any anger when I think about the past. The counterattack that Renaa and I carried out seems to have worked. Did you enjoy the story? Our channel appreciates your company. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on what you thought of the story. Until next time,